Hell, in Sumy region. A Russian drone attacked a bus with people, 9 dead, including an entire family. A renewed offensive on Kyiv as early as this summer. The Russians are amassing equipment and ammunition. The US and EU are warning Russia if there is no peace agreement with Ukraine, there will be a massive wave of sanctions. In Russia, the designer of the Iskander missile system was killed right in his own apartment building entrance. The Trump administration wants a reality show where migrants compete for an American passport. Hello, my name is Veronika Veremayeva. Subscribe to our channel. Things are about to get intense. Let's start with a terrible tragedy. Once again, the Russians have confirmed their status as terrorists. The occupiers attacked a passenger bus carrying civilians near the city of Bilopilia in the Sumy region. As a result of the attack, 9 people were killed and 7 more were injured. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It was later revealed that the Russians had killed an entire family, a father, a mother, who worked as a teacher, and their daughter. They were simply coming home from work. President Zelensky spoke about this.
All those killed were civilians, and the Russians could not have failed to understand what kind of vehicle they were striking. This was a deliberate killing of civilians.
And this is Viktor Vovk, the bus driver who survived the attack. He was saved by the airbag. Mr. Victor had been driving this route for over 30 years. But now, the authorities in the region have decided to stop this route and find a new, safer path.
I shifted into gear to keep going on, and then an explosion. An explosion I couldn't understand, but it was the airbag that deployed. All of that, and even without you, it would have been the same. I got up and got out of the bus. There was a person lying there right next to it. It was just terrible.
Our condolences to the families and loved ones of those who died. I hope that Russia will face just punishment for all the crimes committed against the Ukrainian people. And now to the escalation of the situation at the front. Russia has launched offensive actions in all directions. President Zelensky announced this the day before.
They were launched in all directions. The main direction was precisely the Sumy region. There, 67,000 Russian troops were indeed concentrated. We took appropriate steps to prevent them from joining forces. That is why the Russians are now working to restore and regroup their forces.
In addition to the Sumy region, Russia has significantly intensified its offensive in the Kharkiv direction. There, in the Kupiansk direction, they are crossing the Oskil River.
They stretch cables across the river, load 2 motorcycles at a time onto a boat, and in this way try to get to the opposite bank. The effectiveness of this is highly questionable.
But Ukrainian defenders are putting up a worthy resistance to the Russian occupiers. Fighters from the Phoenix unit of the Revenge Brigade stopped the enemy's advance in the Kupiansk area by destroying a UAV command post and 2 IAP mortars. The situation in Donetsk region is also difficult. There, the enemy is trying to capture Torska. The day before, the Russians began to report that they had allegedly captured Torske. However, there is no talk of a complete capture.
As for the video where they are running around with flags and waving, yes, indeed, a few enemy soldiers managed to enter the settlement of Torske. They demonstratively waved flags for the drone camera. Why did they do this? Well, maybe to show their senior commander, like, look, everything's fine, our guys are there, we're on the spot, everything is good.
However, some soldiers are writing that the enemy did manage to capture certain positions. But again, we're not talking about a complete takeover.
Yes, it's true. The enemy was recently able to enter Torske. Then they were pushed back somewhat, but still, as a result, we have lost positions in that area.
Also in this direction, according to military expert Dmytro Osnihirov, the Russians have set their sights on 4 strategically important cities.
The Russian occupation forces are focusing their offensive on 4 key industrial cities in the Donetsk region: Kostiantynivka, Drushkivka, Kramatorsk, and above all, Sloviansk. Sloviansk holds special strategic significance due to its proximity to the largest shale gas deposits in Europe. Losing control over these territories could make it impossible to implement the joint resource extraction agreement with the United States. If, however, the armed forces of Ukraine manage to hold their positions, the country will have a chance at energy independence, or at the very least, will be able to come significantly closer to achieving it.
The difficult situation on the front is also mentioned by ATO veteran Yevhen Diki. He says that this is one of the levers of pressure on Ukraine.
It is critically important for them to create this image of a continuous offensive. Well, how else are they going to present this at the negotiations? That if we wanted to, we could reach both Kyiv and Lviv. But, well, out of great respect for Trompushka, we might be willing to stop at such and such and such and such, followed by a list of absolutely impossible conditions.
However, we also have some good news. Ukrainian special forces struck a Russian helicopter with an FPV drone, a Ka-52 Alligator, which they claim has no analogs. According to the military, the enemy Alligator tried to conduct a combat patrol over Ukrainian fields, but an unpleasant surprise was waiting for it in the sky. So we wish our defenders endurance. Don't forget that they really need our support. An offensive on Kyiv is once again on the agenda. Recently, CNN warned that Russia could escalate its tactical attacks into a large-scale offensive operation, including a renewed strike on the capital. And now, Colonel retired of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and military expert Roman Svitan is openly talking about this. He believes that if there is no ceasefire, Russia will launch an offensive as early as this summer. According to him, equipment and ammunition are already being stockpiled. The strike may not be deep, but rather along the front line, wherever it is most advantageous. And if a truce does happen, the Russians will use the pause to form reserves and then send them back to the line of contact. Among the possible directions, Svitan names the Zaporizhzhia and Sumy regions, in particular a movement toward Poltava, and from there to the Kyiv region.
If we give them the opportunity to bring their rear to the front for 30 days, in that case, they can really go to the left bank of the Dnieper in some positions, and they can go to the left bank of the Dnieper there, let's say in the region of Zaporozhye, near the Dnieper somewhere there. And the same picture, if they turn around, let's say in the direction of Sumy, that is the exit to Poltava, south of Sumy, through Nezhin, Kopty, exit to the left bank. Well, I do not exclude the possibility of an exit too, including somewhere in the area of the Kyiv region. So in principle, that possibility does exist.
Do you believe that Russia will try to advance on Kyiv again?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And now let's talk about the results of the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul. Earlier, as reported by the Western press, the Russian delegation at the negotiations demanded that Ukrainian troops withdraw from 4 occupied regions. When the Ukrainians refused, the Russians stood up and said that next time it would be 5 regions. However, as it turned out, that was not the limit, because during the negotiations, the Russians threatened to seize as many as 6 regions of Ukraine in their entirety. This was reported by MP Oleksiy Honcharenko. That's how much they want peace.
And here is where the main part begins. Medinsky smoothly transitions to saying that, at first we only wanted Crimea, Donetsk and Luhansk, but now we already want Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk and Crimea. And then he added, next time we'll be talking about the Kharkiv and Sumy regions.
In addition to the occupation of more Ukrainian regions, Western media report that Russia has also reiterated its old demands. That Ukraine must remain neutral, meaning there should be no foreign troops or weapons of mass destruction on its territory. Russia is also demanding that we renounce any claims for reparations. Once again, the Russians brought up the language issue and stated that Ukraine must protect the rights of Russian speakers as a national minority and put an end to nationalistic propaganda. And of course, Ukraine should not officially lay claim to its own 5 regions. Meanwhile, the spokesperson for the dictator of the Russian Federation, Peskov, did not comment on these conditions circulating in the media. He stated that Russia is preparing its own list of conditions for a ceasefire and will present it to Ukraine. He did not disclose any further details. The Ukrainian delegation is also not commenting on the details of the negotiations. However, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs gave a rather comprehensive statement.
Perhaps it is not appropriate to officially discuss the content. I can repeat the general mood and outline the conversations. Ishi and Okumon in this competition. What? Yes, there were unacceptable things, but Ukrainians took it calmly. But again, the Ukrainian delegation handled it with great composure.
Important statements were also made by other representatives from both sides. Ukraine's Defense Minister Umerov stated that a meeting between the two countries' leaders is potentially being prepared. Meanwhile, the head of the Russian delegation, Medinsky, stated that they are ready for a 1,000 for 1,000 exchange, which is expected to take place soon. In fact, the head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirill Budanov, has already commented on the information regarding the large exchange.
I hope this will happen next week. Regarding the lists, well, you understand, there will be an exchange. Let's put it this way. We'll take back whoever we can, and we'll return the same way.
Do you see any real prospects for this type of thing?
I don't see any particular problems with this.
And what do you think about the results of the negotiations in Istanbul? Write your thoughts in the comments. Putin doesn't want peace because he didn't even bother to listen to the peace plan from the US, the EU, and Ukraine. According to the reputable publication Financial Times, the 22-point plan was supposed to be presented by Steve Witkoff, Trump's special representative. Yermak, Umerov, Kellogg, and Rubio took part in the conversation. After the Kremlin refused, Witkoff canceled his visit to Moscow, which was scheduled for May 12 to 16. In other words, the whole world is trying to speed up peace in Ukraine, except for the one who broke that very peace 11 years ago. And European partners of Ukraine, specifically the Coalition of the Willing, immediately began to respond to these developments. First of all, they agreed that Russia's position in the peace negotiations is unacceptable.
We are currently holding discussions with President Trump first and foremost to address the unacceptable fact that Russia, President Putin, for the second time, has not responded to the request to cease fire.
And President Putin does not respond to the questions raised by the Americans. Secondly, they called Trump. As reported by the Office of the President of Ukraine, Zelensky informed Trump about the meeting in Istanbul between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations, and expressed gratitude for the presence in Turkey of U.S. Secretary of State Mark Rubio and the U.S. President's special representative, Keith Kellogg.
He emphasized that for more than 2 months, Russia has left the American proposal for an unconditional ceasefire unanswered, ignores all possible appeals, puts forward unrealistic conditions, and shows no willingness to end the war.
Trump himself also commented on this conversation and, as always, in his own style, saying that Zelensky has no cards to play.
Look, I had a really tough meeting with Zelensky because I didn't like what he said. And it didn't make it any easier. And I've always said that he has no trump cards, he has no trump cards. And you know, I'm being honest, he has no trump cards. You're dealing with a huge army, and you're dealing with someone brave who had great equipment.
Instead, Zelensky is calling for increased pressure on Russia and the introduction of strong additional sanctions. And while Trump only promises in words to impose sanctions against Russia, if a peace agreement with Ukraine is not reached, Europe has already made such a decision. Starting from May 20th, the first large-scale package of sanctions is set to be approved.
More than 100 no and 30 individual sanctions, as well as sanctions targeting Russia's military industry and its suppliers from third countries, disinformation propaganda, and the Russian shadow fleet.
What do you think of this reaction from the Europeans and the US led by Trump? Write your thoughts in the comments. Meanwhile, in Russia, they are burying their boys in graves like industrial waste. Residents of Volgodonsk, Russia, are complaining about the local authorities. They say that the authorities have no respect for Russian soldiers and bury them as if they were trash.
When the guys go to the special military operation, they're told all sorts of things, that they won't be forgotten, that they're heroes, that it's for the motherland. And when I'm not talking about those who came back alive, I'm talking about those who came back as cargo 200. And when they lie here knee-deep in grass, and no one cares about it.
Such is the final journey for the occupiers who invaded Ukraine and kill people. Karma, nothing else. However, it's not just Russian soldiers that the Russian authorities don't need, but also Russian military designers, once they've completed their tasks. In Russia, one of the designers of the Iskander missile system was killed. We're talking about 74-year-old Volodymyr Nedoshevin.
According to preliminary information, the Russian who contributed to the killing of Ukrainians did not die as a result of a planned crime, but during a domestic dispute. Previously, the deceased worked at the Machine Building Design Bureau in Kolomna, Moscow region. Nedoshevin held several patents, but after retiring, he found himself unwanted by anyone.
Nedoshevin was found on May 9th in the entryway of his own building and was taken to the hospital still alive. A few days later, he died. It was later revealed that the retired engineer was thrown down the stairs by his neighbor because Nedoshevin was relieving himself in the entryway. That's how it goes. You work for Russia, help it create weapons that later kill innocent people, and then you're simply forgotten. Admit it. That's typical Russia. Real-life Hunger Games, American style. Just listen to this. The U.S. Department is considering the idea of launching a reality show about migrants competing for American citizenship.
The launch of the show about migrants was reportedly discussed during the presidencies of Barack Obama and Joe Biden, but the idea did not receive support. In contrast, the Trump administration supported the idea. Trump's second presidential term was marked by increased pressure on migrants. And as a candidate, he promised, among other things, to implement large-scale deportations of people without legal status to stay in the United States of America.
Donald Trump, you don't need to make America great again. Just make it normal. Again. That's all for now. Please like this video, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes, and then we'll definitely see each other again.